So, while I'm sure movie executives everywhere are looking for the next Barbenheimer collaboration project they can work on to both accelerate 2 movies in the same week, I think I've found one myself upcoming this September, as it's looking like robot movies are the name of the game, with both DreamWorks' The Wild Robot and Paramount's Transformers 1 releasing the same weekend. Oh, okay, actually, never mind that. Whilst I'm in the middle of editing this video, I come to find that now there's been a brief news update, as it turns out that DreamWorks has delayed The Wild Robot by 1 week exactly to September 27th, specifically to ignore this weekend clash. But even still, they're only 7 days apart, they're still kinda connected. It's still September 2024, so do take a note that there's been a slight delay to avoid this. Apparently DreamWorks doesn't have faith in themselves. But we'll continue with the rest of the video anyway, as it's still probably going to be a notable comparison. Thank you to the people on our Discord for letting me know of that. A mere 7 days wouldn't split up Barbenheimer. And considering there is such a notable overlap there, that kinda leaves me wondering, who actually wins here? The 2 properties seem to simultaneously have crossover audiences and yet somehow seem to be a whole world apart. Literally, unless in a big plot twist the Wild Robot's ending sees the animals' world turned into Cybertron. You know, full on just Terminator-style extermination. That's the wholesome ending we're totally looking for from DreamWorks. One seems to be a studio shot for an Oscar, whilst the other's a studio's continued pursuit for more money from a 40-year-old franchise now. They are 2 very different cases, and yet both are distinctively focused in on their mechanical protagonists via an absence of any human characters. As we talked about with Transformers last week, this is a particularly notable departure for this franchise, which has always accommodated for its pointless human identification figures. And to their credit, rather than doing the whole Godzilla x Kong route of keeping them around whilst being unapologetic in how much they don't really care about them, Transformers 1 is just taking them out of the equation. Whether this pays off for them, I guess we'll see. The one other thing going away from Earth is losing that transforming into recognizable vehicles. As a complete Transformers outsider, my instincts would say that the transforming into cars bit is what makes them so appealing. Regardless, they're trying something new, and to be fair, they've done 500 other movies the other way, so fair enough. Meanwhile, on the Wild Robot side, we've gone even more stripped down. It looks like it'll primarily be just the robot connecting with some animals. But you know, I mean, they can count as characters too. Admittedly, it does look like there's more robots that get involved later in the movie, and there is a whole stacked voice cast. But even still, the core idea in probably the first half of the movie is still mostly this. That's quite interesting. And it's not just the DreamWorks animation that's gone all in on the casting. As we covered in our first Transformers video, we've got Chris Hemsworth, Scarlett Johansson, Brian Tyree Henry, Lawrence Fishburne, and John Hamm. That's one expensive recording booth, so I hope it pays off for them. As for the Wild Robot, we've got Lupita Nyong'o in the lead role. Joining her, there's Catherine O'Hara, Bill Nighy, Kit Connor, Stephanie Hugh, and wait for it, Pedro Pascal. Yep, my man's taking over the world. Now, with all these names, the question remains, are they all voicing the robots, or do the animals talk as well? With an almost dialogue-less trailer, it's hard to tell what's going on there. Honestly, I'd love if the animals didn't talk. The animation in the trailer illustrate exactly what the characters are feeling and communicating so well. It seems a shame to have dialogue spell out the story if that's the way they end up going. The robots, you could justify that. But robots talking to the animals? I'm sure they can make it work, but I'd honestly rather they just didn't. Makes it more artsy that way anyway, if you're gunning for an Oscar. As for the possibility of human characters, well, none of the names on the cast sheet seem to particularly indicate that, with the main robot being called Roz, and all the other names seem to line up pretty well with that. Transformers has also gone along with the more straightforward names with their characters, this prequel showing a time before they were called Optimus Prime and Megatron, and to be fair, I think that's a nice touch, that the bombastic, unsubtle names weren't the ones that they chose. Although I am a little confused with, like, in-universe, they didn't just kind of come into existence with those names. That's a question, actually, though. How are they approaching how these Cybertronians come into existence? I have absolutely no knowledge of the lore. Maybe there's a giant mechanic up in the sky that, you know, drills their tires into their hips. Oh, okay, so apparently there's a grand creator being called Unicron. So I guess that has something to do with it. I'd love to learn how one is born. Let's see that scene. That's the scene that changed Transformers 1, I tell ya. Failing that, maybe they'll go with the 2005 robots route of a mummy Transformer and a daddy Transformer, quote-unquote, making a baby. Either that, or I'm thinking orcs from Lord of the Rings, just a horrific spore pulled out of a sack in the Cybertron mud. And I guess by that logic, Unicron is Sauron. Lovely. Huh. This is twice now that DreamWorks has made a robot-based film. Are the universes connected? Anyway, the question is, who wins that weekend? Both movies release on September 20th, and I'm not sure that's a great idea, to be honest. And September 27th for DreamWorks' The Wild Robot. Ugh, cowards. Originally, Transformers 1 was set for a July release but moved dates. Clearly they thought the R-rated Deadpool and Wolverine was going to eat their audience out. No, was going to eat their audience, so going against The Wild Robot was a much safer choice on that front. But first, welcome to the halfway mark. Thank you for reaching halfway through this video. This is the quick plug to tell you to subscribe. I'd also love to hear your opinions in the comments or on our Discord server, link in the description, and I shall let you get back to the rest of the video. Bye-bye! But that's really the issue for me. They are very much targeting a very similar demographic here. Both are after the family audience, and I just can't see kids having the attention span to do a double feature. 3 hours is like 6 from their perspective. So despite the easy comparisons, this is not exactly a Barbenheimer situation. That was 2 high-profile movies with vastly different premises, much of the hilarity of the internet. Plus, they were a little bit more aged up. You know, we could handle 2 movies in a row. Not only did these 2 movies receive double feature viewings from the whole craze, but they were also boosted by their isolated demographics attending as well. You don't have 2 vastly different movies with overlap, it's almost all overlap. Interestingly, there's also a lot of overlap in November, with Moana 2 and Wicked coming out that same weekend as well. However, weirdly, I think that actually will do well for both. Never underestimate the musical theatre crowd, man. They are relentless. Wickawana all the way. Though that does seem to rhyme with some other green stuff. Maybe not. Anyway, whereas I think Wickawana will be a big weekend for both, I just don't see the same for the Wild Transformer one, you know? You see, the ship name's nowhere near as good. Yes, Transformers have historically had big budget blockbuster appeal, but I don't think that's happening with this one. The overriding thing in the trailer suggests something is just very kid-leaning. You know, everything Keegan-Michael Key says is Bumblebee. Oh, sorry, Badassatron. Despite Hollywood's best efforts, animation isn't just for kids, and a lot of animated movies have a universal appeal that interests a lot of the general audience. I watched the Transformers 1 trailer and I think, this is a kids movie. Whereas with The Wild Robot, I see a much more universal appeal across audiences. However, despite being based on the best-selling book by Peter Brown, to a lot of the general audience, this presents as an original movie, whereas Transformers is the huge 40-year heritage IP with a huge fanbase. Nevertheless, it is under the DreamWorks label, who are no strangers to making hits out of less widely known book adaptations. Shrek, How to Train Your Dragon, The Bad Guys, it's arguably what they do best. So, based on quality, I think The Wild Robot will definitely grab the best critical reception, which may give it legs across its whole box office run. But of course, it's gonna be an interesting debate. I think a lot of this comes down to really where we are as a society on this thing. It all comes down to the parents really making the decision on which route to take. Do parents genuinely watch trailers to see something artistic in motion, or do they just slap together a kids movie that they happen to recognize the characters from and call it a day? Because whilst both films can easily garner a non-kid audience for those that are fans of Transformers in the last 40 years, which is like half of the demographic of the Earth, and the other has a massive DreamWorks audience that is also a little bit older, or just love animation, or a good movie. Hey, that's me over there. I'm one of those. In a sense, financially, it is kind of a toss-up. Because if we've come to learn anything, sometimes when it comes to quality, the wider world doesn't give a damn. And heck, even if we do find out which one is superior over the other, it'd be interesting to compare them to the likes of like the live-action Transformers movies before and all other movies in context, you know? Is this another DreamWorks super success? Is this the clashing of giants comparing the biggest successes of Transformers and DreamWorks? Or are these both mid-movies that will just kind of flail each other's wrists at each other in this fight? While I haven't got a clue how it does on the success front, unless Transformers 1 does a shocker and is actually a genuinely excellent movie, I personally think that The Wild Robot will be the one far better received and will be remembered far better in the long term. This one has the potential to being a real modern DreamWorks classic, and perhaps the last as DreamWorks collapses in on itself afterwards. At the very least, I can't see next year's Oscars having Al Pacino awkwardly announcing, "My eyes see Transformers 1." But you never know. I'm always a fan of animation, so I'd love for both of these to be great. Despite production issues from last year's strikes, 2024 has so far felt like a return to form for cinemas post-pandemic. We've had insane blockbusters, not so good blockbusters, Oscar bait, original horror stuff, and of course, your animation fare. This is the first year I could see two high-profile movies come out at the same time and both be excellent. Whether we get that from the wild Transformer weekend, that remains to be seen. But who am I to judge? On that note, my name's been Daz. Thank you very much for reaching the end of this video. What do you think's gonna happen here? What are your predictions? I'd love to get a full breakdown. The longer the monologue paragraph, the better. Use that character limit. Does YouTube have one? I don't know about that. And I shall see you in a little bit.